Now, we're joined, as I said, by Treasury Minister, that is Andrew Griffith. I'll start with that question, if he's with us. We've done a poll as well, not only just listening to what Nigel Farage said, that the chairman has to go. We did a poll and we've asked, what do people think? Is it time for the chairman of NatWest to go? And I have to say, 91% have said yes, he has to go. Only 9% wanting him to stay. Morning, Andrew.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
So the chairman has to go. Nigel singing your praises, but saying, do you know what? NatWest now are doing supposedly an independent inquiry into what went on, the leak, and also closing Nigel's account. But actually, it's not independent at all. It's one of the establishment, one of their friends, and a key Remainer whose company will be in charge of it.
Well, look, there's a number of inquiries now going on. Nigel's absolutely right. He's effectively restating the government's position, the position that I, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have made clear throughout, that this is an issue of democracy. Nobody should be debanked in a democracy. It's a really valuable and important fundamental right. And that applies, of course, as I've always maintained, across the left and the right. So whether it's journalists, we've seen clerics. I've always said that, you know, it could have applied to a trade union. If you could find a law-abiding climate activist, it could be them. None of those organisations should be debanked. And that's not just about NatWest, because the government owns that. You know, bank licences, you know, are the closest that you've got to a licence to print money. Literally, they're a legal licence. And so all of our banks, you know, have that great privilege. There's many people who'd like to have a banking license. Someone like Dave Fishwick of the Bank of Dave has tried really hard to get a banking license. I'd like to see that. It's not a decision for me. It's a decision for ultimately the banking regulators. But people really want those licenses because they confer an important position in society. So we should look at this through the lens not just of any one bank, not just because the state happens to own a significant amount of shares, although that reminds us that when banks go wrong, sometimes it's all of us as taxpayers who pick up the bill.
Andrew, can I pick up with you what Nigel said about Sir Howard Davies? I mean, does the government really still have confidence in the chairman of NatWest, given that he said that he had full confidence in Dame Alison Rose, even after it emerged that she'd leaked confidential client information to a journalist? I mean, how can the government still have confidence in the chairman of a bank who has confidence in somebody who breaches client confidentiality?
Well, Nigel, the chairman, Howard Davies, Sir Howard Davies, is going. And that's an important fact. He's already announced that he's going. There is, as I understand it, already a search for his replacement. That research, you know, I'm sure no doubt is proceeding at pace. And when and if a new candidate is found, then you can have that conversation. So he is already going. This is a process that was already in train, predating that. And you'll understand, because as minister and responsible for the whole of this sector, not just any one bank, the really important thing is that we move fast to implement the new regulations that we've talked about, make sure that we get to the bottom. The FCA has said they're having a look at this. So has the ICO as it relates to potential breach of client confidentiality. You and others are aware that this affects potentially thousands, if not tens of thousands of people.
Well, Andrew, can I ask you about it?
And we should just keep moving forward now.
Can I ask you about that? Does the government actually have any information from the banks or the regulator or from anybody as to how many bank accounts have been closed down by banks in recent years? Do you know, as the minister, the scale of this particular problem?
I don't. And look, there's clearly a number of reasons why accounts are closed down. The biggest reason is customer initiative, that customers simply want to choose a different bank. There's other cases of fraud. There's also, just credit quality. What we don't know definitively, and that's the point of the work that needs to be done, is to get to the bottom of how many cases there are where this may or may not have happened. And the issue is, regardless of the number of cases, is now that people don't trust that decisions that may have been made on, what people would regard as legitimate grounds about people's credit quality or their behaviour as account holders, they can't be sure on what basis those were made.
Just finally, Andrew, we're speaking to somebody later on in the show who's got a business, who's been a NatWest customer for 35 years and has been told he's got 21 days and his account will be closed. This is something that is affecting lots and lots of businesses. It's actually putting people out of business, the fact that they can't get a bank account in certain sectors. Is the government going to do something to protect businesses from having their bank accounts closed when they've done absolutely nothing wrong and they've just been closed on a whim?
And we only need a one-word answer.
Well, I had an exactly similar case in my constituency yesterday of a business that had been with the same institution for a quarter of a century and then suddenly gets a letter out of the blue. That is one reason why a big focus of what we're trying to do is bring the oxygen of transparency to how these decisions are made and on what grounds. And I think whether that's customers or businesses, that's a good thing to aim for.
And one other thing, Andrew, which is in the papers today, and that actually is the profits of NatWest and how they've soared. I believe the Select Committee, Harriet Baldwin's going to do a committee on it about how they're keeping the increase in interest rates. They're putting that to borrowers, but they're not giving it to savers. It's just another thing, and we'll let you go now, that the government's got to look at, that they're not passing on that money on to savers as well.
Yeah, let's be clear. Look, we Conservatives believe in the ferocious problem-solving power of business, right? We believe in a private sector economy. But what we want from our businesses, and that applies particularly to those who occupy a privileged position like banks, is they treat their customers well, fairly. They remember why they exist, and they do pass on appropriately things like interest rates to savers who've had the most torrid time.
Andrew, it's wonderful to hear that, and thank you very much for coming on this morning.